Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Gavriella's Azkara. This is not the ideal format, but it'll have to do. We would also like to thank everyone who learned Mishnayot in Gavriella's memory. Religious observance was always part of Gavriella's life. There were times throughout the course of her illness that this observance was challenged by various circumstances or by the illness itself, and that bothered Gavriella. She always wanted to do the right thing halachically. Anytime she asked us a halachic question, when we would give her an answer, she would verify that the Pesach was given by a Rav and that we didn't just make it up on our own to give her an answer that would make things easier for her. She was a person of principle and a person of truth. Though she wasn't attached to any particular rabbi, I think the concept of rabbinic authority was important to Gavriella, which is why I wanted a Rav to speak at her Azkara. I chose Rav Yoni Rosenzweig because of my great appreciation for his professional dedication to the area of mental health. I knew that Rav Yoni was the rabbi of the nearby Netzach Menashe Shul, but I only met him months ago as the result of someone tagging me in one of his Facebook posts. I usually ignore these tags, but for some reason, I looked at this one and I saw that Rav Yoni was looking for professionals to speak with about eating disorders for a book that he's writing about mental health and halacha. I messaged him that I wasn't an eating disorders professional, but that I can probably offer him some insight. I hope that I had even the tiniest impact on this incredible endeavor that Rav Yoni is undertaking. Through his work, Rav Yoni will raise the profile of mental health and remove the stigma that has been associated with mental illness. He will bring to light various aspects of mental illness that have until now been kept in the dark, and in doing so, he will put mental illness on par with physical illness in the realm of Jewish law. This is so very important. He will offer halachic consideration to a population that has long been ignored or overlooked. But in my opinion, the most critical impact that Rav Yoni will have is that he will reduce suffering for people with mental illness through what I'm sure will be sensitive and well thought out Peskei Halacha. As the mother of someone who suffered with a mental disorder, this is very meaningful to me. Thank you so much, Rav Yoni, for agreeing to give a shiur, the Eloi Nishmat Gavriella. Rav Yoni.
Thank you very much. Obviously, I wish it was under better circumstances that we were doing this, but I am so very honored, really, to be giving this shiur, really a short presentation. I promise not to go over 15, 20 minutes. What I want to talk about today, the topic that was chosen was seeing beyond what is on the outside in the realm of mental health. I'd like to start discussing this from a technical point, and I hope I won't lose you because even though it's technical, and to go from there to really look at 2 points which I think are very, very critical when we look at mental health. The technical point is this. The Shulchan Aruch discusses halachas of physical health, or I would say, let's say, call it medicine and Shabbos in Orach Chaim Siman Shin Kaf Chet. There you will find all the laws pertaining to Shabbos observance and medicine. And in that siman, you will not find almost any halacha that pertains to mental health. All the halachas that you will find pertain to physical health, except for one. There is one place where the Shulchan Aruch, borrowing from a book of one of the Rishonim in the probably 13th or 14th century, named Shibolei Haleket, where he mentions the following halacha. It will seem a little bit archaic and irrelevant, certainly to modern times, but the question was whether a woman is allowed to express milk so that she can sprinkle that milk on someone who is suffering from a neshifat ruach ra'ah. That was what it says over there. And the halacha is that it's not allowed. It's not allowed. She's not allowed to express milk. It's a prohibition to express milk for no reason, or even for a medical reason. And to express it or to sprinkle it on someone who's suffering from neshifat ruach ra'ah, whatever that is, it doesn't matter right now. It's some sort of mental issue. The Shulchan Aruch says is problematic. What I do want to turn your attention to is why it's problematic. The Shulchan Aruch says, in the name of the Shibolei Haleket, that the reason is because Leika Tzara Yatera. He says there is no Tzara Yatera. The term Tzara Yatera, I would say, there isn't any significant anguish that is involved in this condition called neshifat ruach ra. Once again, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. There's no significant anguish that accompanies such a condition. And the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch learn from this, that if there was significant anguish, that if there was a tzara yetera, that, or maybe even tzara, at all, that it would be allowed in that situation to express milk for that purpose, which could be a Torah prohibition or rabbinic prohibition, depending on how you look at the severity of the action that is taken. The term tzara yetera is what I really want to focus on, because from my research, I did not find that this term is used in almost any other case. It's a unique term that is used within Ilchot Shabbat for this specific situation. And when I looked at that, I asked myself why that is. And the answer that I gave myself is as follows, is that when you talk about mental health, what you're talking about is tsar. What you're talking about is personal, internal anguish. And the thing is that it's impossible for us to see. See, when we look at physical health, many times we can identify that the person is suffering. Sometimes they're bedridden. Sometimes you can feel their forehead and you can tell that they have a fever. And of course, if things are really bad, they're hospitalized, and you can tell, they're hooked up to machines and this and that and the other. There are a lot of things, there are a lot of telltale signs when someone is unwell physically. Their story, I wouldn't say is an open book to anyone looking around, but relatively, people can see. Tsar, the term tzara yetera, the mental anguish that is actually the basis for whatever's going on with this individual, is hidden from many, many people. And Judy spoke about the stigma. We all know about stigma. And the part of the problem with the stigma is, of course, that the anguish is many times hidden from many of us. We don't see it. We don't know it. We don't see that people are suffering around us. When I started writing this book 3 years ago, what happened, which was pretty amazing to me, was that I suddenly realized how many people around me in my own community are suffering from things I wasn't even aware of. I was completely unaware. And once again, it's one of the, I would say, blessings, of course, in, parentheses, blessings of physical illness, that people are usually not afraid to share it, and that everyone is usually aware of it, so that they can surround them with and shower them with love and affection, support, empathy, sympathy. But people who suffer from mental illness many times hide that fact because of the stigma. And in a sense, unfortunately, I say this with good reason, because when we look at people with mental illness, many times we misunderstand how we're supposed to react to them, how we're supposed to relate to them. We make them feel less than what they are. We make them feel like whatever's going on is not real to some extent, right? So if someone, God forbid, had cancer, right? And he would say to you that you wouldn't tell him, well, you should just get out of bed in the morning and think positive thoughts and things will be better. You wouldn't say that to the person. But if someone comes and says that they're suffering from depression, some people who don't mean badly, right? But they come and they say, oh, well, you have such a good life. You have such a positive, why don't you just get up and, think positive thoughts, do good things, et cetera, et cetera. Everything will be fine, after that. And that's such a misunderstanding of what's going on. That individual many times can no more do that than the person with the cancer. They can't just willfully make it go away. The suffering that they're going through is internal of such a degree that we're not even aware of what that is. And it's that mental anguish that we need to get used to recognizing and understanding on a deep level in order for us to be able to really relate to it properly. So that's one side of things, right? That I want, so we look at someone on the outside, they could be working side by side with us every day and we're not even aware of what's going on with them really. And then one day we find out, God forbid, they did something like this, like that. And then we're like, what? That person? That person, yeah. That person that was next to you every single day. They're suffering, and they were suffering internally every day in their head very, very much, and you didn't even realize that they were going through that. And I hope that we can, and I join, what Judy said before, I join her very much in the hope that we can create like really a safe space, within our public lives for people with mental illness to share and to feel safe, to come forwards and to be there. But there's another side to this coin that I want to share with you today, that I think is also just as important, maybe even more important than the one that I was just talking about. And I'd like to share it with you through reading from a passage that Rav Soloveitchik wrote one place in his book. The book is called "The Lord is Righteous in All His Ways." Actually, he didn't write it; he said it. It was a collection of speeches that Shiur that he gave, actually surrounding this time of year, the 9 days, 3 weeks, this time of mourning. And I would like to quote from there. He brings a Gemara in Masechet Nedarim. I will quote two passages. Here's the first one. The Mishnah in Nedarim tells a story about some people who wanted to marry off a member of their family to a certain girl, but he did not like her because she was ugly. Afraid that pressure to marry her would be brought to bear upon him, he took a vow not to do so. Afterwards, they took her in, washed her, cleaned her up a bit, dressed her properly in a nice dress, and as a result, her appearance changed. She came out, and the man thought she was a different woman. He liked her and regretted having taken the vow. He had thought she was ugly, but in fact, she was not ugly. And, continues the Mishnah, Rabbi Ishmael allowed him to marry her by finding an opening and annulling the vow. He said to him, here's the important part, "Is it regarding this one that you vowed?" And the man responded, "No." At which point the Mishnah says, Rabbi Ishmael wept and said, "The daughters of Israel are beautiful, but poverty makes them ugly. Benot Israel na'oten ela sheha aniyut menavaltan." Yeah, they're beautiful, but poverty makes them ugly. The Rav goes on to develop this point, and then he brings the following story. I always repeat the story that an old Jew in America told me. He came from a small town in Lithuania and arrived in the United States with 16 cents in his pocket. He landed on Ellis Island, the immigration center, and an agent from a sweatshop in New York picked him up. New York was a city of sweatshops. They used to pull in the new immigrants and put them up in the cellar of a dirty hotel. The owners of the sweatshops used to work them for 10, 12, 14 hours a day, feed them, let them sleep a few hours, and pay them a few dollars a week. They worked under the most galling conditions, but they accepted their lot. They had no alternative. It was the only way they could make a living. He told me that Mondays and Tuesdays passed this way, and he did not see the sunshine from the roof of the tenement house down to the basement where he slept and where he had a place for meals. Friday came, he walked into the room of the owner, the manager, got his pay envelope, and said, "Good day, I will see you Monday morning." The manager looked at him and said, "Why Monday? Why not tomorrow?" Answered the man, "Tomorrow? It is Shabbos tomorrow." "What do you mean, tomorrow?" "Well," said the manager, "if you do not come in tomorrow, do not come in on Monday. You will not have a job." So he got another job. Once again, the whole week was good, but when he told his manager that he could not come in on Shabbos, he lost his job. Finally, he began to starve, and once a policeman found him on a bench in Central Park. After trying 4 times, he finally went to the manager and told him that he was ready to violate the Shabbat. And he became a Mechal Shabbos. And later, as soon as he could get out of the business, he got out and became a strict Shomer Shabbat. This, says the Rav, precisely is Rabbi Ishmael's statement, "Benot Israel na'oten ela sheha aniyut menavaltan." A Jew is loyal. A Jew wants to obey the law. He wants to observe. A Jew would like to stay home on Shabbat and not go to the factory. But many American Jews slipped. It was simply a question of employment. Either you come in or you do not have a job. Benot Israel na'oten. But many trip because ha'aniyut menavaltan, poverty, hunger, and worry make them ugly. It is true literally, but it is also true symbolically, concludes the Rav. The exterior of Knesset Israel might be very repulsive, intolerable, and offensive at times, but intrinsically, its inner personality is always beautiful. There is something in Knesset Israel that can never be corrupted. Corruption is something extraneous, peripheral to Knesset Israel. I think that this description of the Rav, which I think is so on point, relates also to the flip side of the coin of what we're talking about. We talk many times about the necessity of seeing beyond what's on the outside, right? The person puts on a facade. They're suffering inside, internally, but you're not even aware of it. You don't even know what's going on with that person. And you're not aware to the extent of the anguish that's going on with that person. But what happens when we are aware of that, of the extent? What happens when we are aware of that anguish? Here we run the risk of going the opposite direction. I yearn for the day when, stigma won't be a problem and we're able to really be mekabel completely and understand completely those individuals suffering from mental health issues. But I don't want that to become everything that they are in the eyes of other people. That at that point, people start saying, you know what? That person, poor person, right? Like, I feel so bad for that person. They're suffering so much. And it encompasses their entire personality. It becomes who they are in the eyes of other people. That they, because of the circumstances, because of the context of that person's life, because of what they fell into, because of the situation that they find themselves in, all we can see is the ugliness. We can't see the beauty within. We can't see that that person has a rich inside, has a rich life, has a rich value system, ideas, hobbies, a personality that goes way, way beyond that specific mental disorder that they may be suffering from. We run the risk of being, in a sense, oversensitive to the mental issue, of saying, oh, this person, this is what they are, this encompasses their entire being. It does not. It does not. It is something that has encroached upon that beauty that is within that person, something that has encroached upon a beautiful soul that exists way, way deep down inside, which we can't always see, unfortunately, because Bnot Israel na'othen, the daughters of Israel, and also the boys, also the men of Israel, are beautiful, Baruch Hashem. But ha'aniyut min avaltan, that's the problem. The problem is that many times the poverty, the circumstances, the context of one's life simply covers everything to the extent that you have trouble seeing anything else. And sometimes even the person who's ill has trouble seeing anything else. And that's also very, very sad when they can't see anything beyond the mental illness about themselves. And that also would be very, very sad and unfortunate. We need to get used to doing both things. It's a balancing act. And I'm not saying that I know any better how to do it, but it's a balancing act. We need to see the pain and the anguish and the suffering for what it is. And at the same time, not to chas v'shalom reduce the person in front of us to that pain, to that anguish, which is certainly so dominant in that person's life, but it's not who they are. It's not what they are. It's just the aniyut that surrounds them. But it is by no means the beauty within, by no means should diminish from the beauty within. We need to be able to see that beauty for what it is. And once we do, once we're able to balance those two things, then I think we can make a really good and safe space for a lot of people who are suffering within our communities. And I hope that these words and everything else that will be done this evening will be really Leilu Nishmat Gavriella, and that her memory should be really a blessing for everyone here.
Amen. Rabbi Rosenzweig, thank you very much. You reminded me of something Judy said to me. This was years ago, before she even became an expert. She said, you don't have an anorectic daughter, you have a daughter who has anorexia. Right? That it's just something that comes in that, is one part of them or they suffer from. It doesn't define who they are. And yeah. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. We've now asked, I hope he's on because I'm not seeing in the screen. Let me go. Mark Weiss, who is a friend and neighbor. Mark, go off mute if you're there.
All right, I'm off.
Okay, good. There you are. Hi. Mark said an old friend, even before we moved here, when Judy and I were in Grus, in 1991, the year of the Gulf War. Mark was a BMT guy, so we knew him from there, and now they're neighbors. Mark really succeeded where a lot of others didn't. We have so many friends who tried to help us with Gavi and try to help Gavi herself, engaging her in things. And Mark really succeeded, and he succeeded actually several times. Mark is a physical therapist, but usually with very young children, and that's Gavi's love. And when Gavi was home at various points, when she wasn't working or learning and had time where she was, just at home, Mark had set up with her that she would come to the schools that he would work at and do the therapies, and he would have Gavi be his assistant. And so she could learn a little about it, and she could be with the kids. And remember, several times Mark brought her just for that, and within a week, the head of the school was calling Gavi to be a substitute because, she saw how Gavi, how good Gavi was with the kids. And Mark also gets credit because, and again, why Gavi took it from him, I don't know. I mean, there were many other people, she would close out, but Mark would say, okay, so we're going to this school today. And Gavi said, no, I don't feel up to it. I'm not ready. And Mark said, okay, I'll be by in 10 minutes to pick you up. And he was able to succeed. And actually Mark gave Gavi a very good idea when she was looking at studying. At one point she started studying hydrotherapy, which was able to also be with young kids, but also be in the para-refu'i world. It ended up not working, but Mark really, got her involved and was very helpful. And we greatly appreciate that, and Gavi appreciated it. Mark used to say, Mark was the only person Gavi used to answer WhatsApps back. So I think Gavi will even acknowledge that they had a special relationship. So we've asked Mark to give a few words, Gam Divrei Torah, and then maybe a little bit about Gavi.
Okay, so first, off paper, I just want to thank Alan for that moving introduction. It really it means a lot to me. I want to express my appreciation to the Krasna family, Alan and Judy, Talia, Natanya, and Gilad, for the opportunity to share some of my experiences with Gavi and to describe to everyone the Gavriella that I knew. As Alan said, we worked together in a ma'on, and watching Gavi work with children was truly special. She was uninhibited, animated, and incredibly energetic. She approached each child and treated them as if they were the only ones there. She had the patience of a saint and shoulders broad enough to hold, carry, and calm every baby or child she came into contact with. In the classroom, she demonstrated incredible leadership skills and got along with everyone. Within seconds of her coming into the room, she was running activities and playing games with the kids, and the more experienced staff were in awe of her and how natural this came to her. Her energy motivated everyone around her to try and be better. But what was fascinating was her constant thirst for knowledge to learn and understand what she could do to help all children, normal developing kids as well as those with special needs. She learned quickly, understood what and why certain things had to be done certain ways, and was able to follow through and apply theory to practice. Gavi's energy and positivity carried over to the staff. As the Menahelet of the Ma'on said to me, after she saw her working for the first time, "Hi pashut madhima, eifo matzata ota." While it had been a long time since Gavi had worked in the Ma'on, the staff was devastated when they heard that she had passed. I heard one of the staff members that knew her describing her to a newer worker, and it was amazing that the impact that Gavi had was still felt by the staff, even though so much time had elapsed. I asked some of the staff to describe her in a few sentences. Here's what one of them said. Bachura adina v'shketa, kula lev kshura layeladim. Hayeladim ayu nigashim eleha. Haya na'im l'socheach ita al kol davar. Hi hayta ni'ima v'chavrutit. Hachi chazak etzla haya kshayeladim ayu mechakim la v'tzoakim Gavriella kshi nechnesa lakita. Gam hamitaplot ma'od hitlahavu minana. This is what the Menahelet of the Ma'on said. Lo yashanti shlosha leilot la'achar sheshamati. Hi hayta ma'od miyuchedet. משהו בלט בעדינות ובשלווה שלה. היא שידרה רוגע בכל הכיתה. ילדים היו ניגשים אליה. היא התחברה לילדים בקצב כל כך מהיר והם התחברו אליה. הם כל כך אהבו אותה והיו צועקים גבריאלה, גבריאלה, כשהיא נכנסה לכיתה. After she left the Ma'on, I asked her in one of our WhatsApp conversations how she was adapting to the new gan she was working in. Her answer was, and I quote, "The gan is awesome because all kids are awesome," followed by an emoji describing how awesome it really was. When Moshe talks to Hashem about who will replace him as leader of Bnei Israel, the Medrash writes, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, notzer te'ina yochal pirya. Yoshua harbe shiratcha v'harbe chilek lecha kavod. V'hu haya mashkim u'ma'ariv beveit havad shelcha. Hu haya mesader et hasafsalim, v'hu pores et hamachzelaot. Ho'il v'hu shiratcha b'chol kocho, kedai hu sheyishamesh et Yisrael, she'eino ma'abed scharo. The Medrash explains that the reason Yehoshua was worthy to be the leader of Am Yisrael was because hu haya mesader et hasafsalim v'hu pores et hamachzelaot. He served both Moshe and the nation by setting up benches and laying down mats for them. The Gemara writes related to this Medrash, Pnei Moshe ki pnei chama, Pnei Yoshua ki pnei levana, Oy la lo'ota busha, v'oy la lo'ota chlima. The sun gets its light from Hashem, and the moon gets its light from the sun. When Moshe came down from Har Sinai, he had karnei or, which represents the sun. And Hashem is asking him to share it with Yehoshua, who represents the moon. But where does the busha uchlima fit? Yehoshua was chosen to lead in the merit of his setting up the benches and laying down the mats. He did it without looking for honor or glory, and at the same time wasn't embarrassed to serve the nation this way. The Zkanim, who were wiser and more experienced than Yehoshua, didn't serve the nation by setting up the benches because they viewed it as embarrassing. When the Zkanim learned that this was the exact reason Yehoshua was chosen to be their leader, they said to themselves, Oy la lo tabusha. The embarrassment we felt that prevented us from serving the nation is what prevented us from becoming the leaders. Leadership comes from serving the nation without being embarrassed from your task, nor looking for honor or glory from it. It is exactly when you are genuinely concerned for the needs of Am Yisrael and don't take your own personal needs into account that makes you a true leader. This is the Gavriella Krasna that I knew, the real Gavriella Krasna. I got to see Gavi in her element, doing what she most enjoyed, doing what made her happy, making a difference in children's lives. She did it because she loved kids and wanted to help them. She always put them before herself, just like a true leader. She never looked for glory or fame and was never embarrassed by any task. She was an inspiration to everyone around her, and for me personally, her energy inspired me from the first day we worked together and will always continue to do so. This was the Gavi that I knew. Tei nishmata tzura b'tzura chayim.
Amen. Thank you, Mark. That was beautiful. Judy, do you have, Judy has a, okay.
Thank you very much, Mark. Rav Yoni said a lot of things that I'm going to say. For the record, I wrote this before I heard him speak. This is probably going to sound strange, but in a way, Gavriella's death has allowed us to focus on her life. For the past 13 years, living with Gavriella's eating disorder hindered our ability to fully appreciate how much good Gavriella was doing in this world. I feel like now we can see a much fuller picture of a meaningful life that was dedicated to connection, giving, and kindness. It is important for us to memorialize Gavriella in a way that she would have approved of and in a way that feels right to us. When someone dies of cancer, the family often requests donations to a cancer society. It makes sense that a family would want to promote research of a disease that took their loved one so they can find a cure and spare other families the loss that they are experiencing. In that vein, we thought about doing a fundraising campaign that would either help families who have a loved one with an eating disorder or promote better research and treatment in the eating disorders field. However, we came to the conclusion that we didn't want to memorialize our daughter in association with the illness that led to her death. We wanted to memorialize our daughter in association with the love for children that was so prevalent in her life. Gavriella lost 1.5 years of school due to her eating disorder. To her immense credit, she was able to complete her Bagriyot and effectively graduate from high school by primarily teaching herself the material. She then went on to do 2 years of Shegut Umi, which was a testament to how much Gavriella wanted to serve her country and do something meaningful. It wasn't easy for her to get to the point where she was healthy enough to do this. The first year, Gavriella worked at Shalva with babies who have Down syndrome. The second year, she worked at the Amit Beit HaYeled, a home for kids who were removed from their families by social services due to violence, severe dysfunction, and other awful things that no child should have to experience. After her second year of Shirut, Gavriella was asked to stay on as an employee of the Beit HaYeled, essentially taking on the role of parenting 11 children. She was a mother to them in every sense. She prepared their meals, helped them with homework, made sure they had clothes and shoes, took them to haircut and doctor's appointments, attended parent-teacher conferences, made sure they took their meds, and tended lovingly, patiently, and competently to their emotional needs. She loved that role, those children, and that place more than anything. When we were looking for a way to memorialize Gavriella that focused on her authentic self instead of her illness, we immediately thought of the Beit HaYeled, where Gavriella was able to escape the shackles of her eating disorder enough to fully invest herself in her job and her kids. It was a place where she felt fulfilled and loved, a place where her quest for meaning and purpose was actualized, a place where the healthy, true part of herself was able to shine and thrive. They say that home is where the heart is. For Gavriella, the Beit HaYeled was home. The love, encouragement, confidence, education, self-respect, discipline, and dignity that she instilled in the kids in her groups and their successes going forward in life is Gavriella's legacy. By investing in the Beit HaYeled, we will honor that legacy and memorialize Gavriella in a way that is active and alive. Gavriella spent countless hours playing soccer with the kids on the small outdoor fields. So when the director of the Beit HaYeled suggested that we raise funds to restore and shade that very field where Gavriella spent so many afternoons playing with her kids, we all agreed that it was a perfect idea. Alan took it a step further by suggesting that we name the field Gan Gabi, even though we know it is not a gan. Not much has felt right to us since Gavriella died, but this does. To those of you who have already contributed, thank you so much for helping us honor Gavriella's legacy and memory. For anyone who is interested in contributing, please contact us, and we will be happy to send you the link to the dedicated donation page.
Which is now on the screen.
Okay, which is now on the screen. When you think of Gavriella, think of her smile, think of her laugh, think of her kindness, think of her brilliance, think of her graciousness, think of her generosity, think of her pure soul, think of her gentleness, think of her compassion, think of her thoughtfulness, think of her patience, think of her tolerance, think of her sarcasm, think of her cynicism, think of her goodness, think of her insightfulness, think of her talents, think of her aptitude, think of her eclectic musical tastes, think of her inner strength, think of her morality, think of her virtue, think of her complexity, think of her integrity, think of her dignity, think of her rolling her eyes as I say all of these things about her. Please remember her. She was far too extraordinary to be forgotten. Thank you for joining us in honoring Gavriella's memory. Tehinam Shat Rabbi Tzorah Chaim, Began Enet Tehim Unuchata.